Good evening and thanks so much for joining us. I'm Glenn Mills. ABC4 is proud to bring you a week of debates for Salt Lake City Council. Tonight we feature the race for District 5. This area goes from 900 South to 2100 South and from I-15 to 1300 East with some carve-outs as you see on the map. Some of the neighborhoods in this part of the city include the ballpark area, Liberty Wells and East Liberty Park, as well as part of Central City. Liberty Park and Smith's Ballpark also located within this district. There are 5 candidates in the running for District 5. You see them here. They include Sarah Rill, George Chapman, incumbent Darren Mono, Amy J. Hawkins, and Vance Hansen. We're going to start this debate with an opening statement that will give each candidate 1 minute. And prior to the debate, it was determined that Mr. Chapman will have the first opening statement. Mr. Chapman, the next minute is yours.
My name is George Chapman. I write a local news blog at georgechapman.net. I'm running to stop the defunding of the police, which recently resulted in 50 911 calls on hold. I'm running to force the city to open up the tens of thousands of acres that it doesn't allow housing on to have housing. I'm running to insist that the Salt Lake City Council fight the drug dealing in the homeless population around the city. I want them to allow walking police patrols in parks, and I want them to insist that the Salt Lake County Jail accept, book, and incarcerate drug dealers. I want the City Council to make sure that UTA implements a $1 bus fare and stops increasing pollution with road diets and road changes. Thank you for listening. I'm George Chapman.
Okay, we will now turn to Ms. Rill. You have the next minute for an opening statement.
Hi, my name is Sarah Rill, and I am grateful to be here today, and thanks to everyone that's put this together, ABC4 and all of the partners. When I started this campaign, I decided to walk every street in the district. I wasn't canvassing, but learning and seeing the entire community. I saw a lot of opportunities, but I also saw a lot of challenges. I grew up here. I care a lot about how we grow. The role of a city council member is to listen, to advocate, to respond, and communicate to the community. That is my biggest priority, to listen to you and to respond to you. What if you finally felt heard? What if you felt like you had a voice? Well, that's why I'm running, to represent you and to build our community together. I see you, I hear you, and I've walked your street. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We now turn to Dr. Hawkins for a 1-minute opening statement.
Hello, my name is Amy J. Hawkins, and I'm here today because I'm running as a strong voice for our community. I'm a scientist, I'm an educator, and I've been a strong community advocate for the ballpark community. I've already accomplished great things for our district. I've pulled in hundreds of thousands of dollars for solutions, for a bike and pedestrian byway on Kensington Avenue to make safe crossings throughout our district. I've pulled in $150,000 for opioid education in Utah classrooms because I believe in large part our homelessness crisis is a crisis of addiction. And I've also served as head of the Ballpark Community Council for 3 years now throughout a spike in violent crime. I'm hoping that you'll list me first on your ballot because I really want to keep working on these solutions for our community, and I love the work. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now turn to Mr. Hansen. You have 1 minute.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the news for this opportunity and the people that have helped me. I was born and raised in Salt Lake City. My specialty and career and enjoyment has been in law enforcement and education. My grandmother was a teacher, and a lot of my ancestors were. I'm familiar with the problems, and I'm running to represent the people and to work with the community and try to represent them the best of my ability. I thank you a lot, and I'm looking forward to this opportunity of serving you.
Mr. Mono, we will now turn to you to conclude our opening statements. The next minute is yours.
Thank you so much, Glenn. I'm so excited to talk tonight about the city and the district that I love. If any of you have seen me in a virtual meeting over the past year, you may have noticed a quilt that hangs behind my head. It's a map of Rome with public spaces depicted in white and private spaces depicted in black. When my mother was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, her first goal was to make a quilt for all of her kids, and this is the quilt that I asked for. I'm an urban planning nerd. I love cities and I love maps, and this particular map reminds me that cities are a series of connected public spaces. And as your city council member, I'm going to continue to fight for the public spaces in our city, including streets, roads, plazas, parks, trails, libraries, and community centers, because these spaces make our city stronger, make our community more tight-knit, and make our lives healthier. I'm Darren Mono, and I'm excited to continue serving District 5.
All right, thank you very much, candidates. Let's talk a little bit about the format of this debate. It is as follows. Due to the number of candidates tonight, we had to rearrange things, so each candidate will have 1 minute to respond to our questions. After each candidate has had the opportunity to do that, we will allow for 30 seconds of rebuttal time in some instances where they can address the statements made by their opponents. Rebuttal time may be replaced with a follow-up question at my discretion. Then at the end of this debate, each candidate will have time for a 1-minute closing statement as well. The questions from tonight's debate have come from us right here in the ABC4 newsroom, and the candidates have not had access to them prior to the debate. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to start with a question related to homelessness, a big issue in Utah's capital city and on the minds of many in other parts of the state as well. So here is my question to you, the candidates, tonight. There are many stakeholders and groups working on this issue, and they may come to the table with different ideas. Things can get heated at times. So how will you balance all of these diverse voices at the table when it comes to addressing the unsheltered? Ms. Rill, you have the first minute.
Thank you. This is a great question. We talk about this a lot. This is a lot of the concerns that have been brought to me from constituents. For me, it's first and foremost to think about all of these individuals as human beings. And then we start to look out how we can find solutions to help these people get a trajectory, change the trajectory of their lives. I think that there are major service gaps in the way that we are caring for people without a home. We need to identify those service gaps and look at a holistic approach in helping support the community. It's going to take people from a lot of different areas coming together and working together to help all of these individuals get back into homes and into the workforce. And I think that my skills in bringing people together, collaborating, no matter what side of the table they work on, is a big skill in being able to do that. Bring people together, look at a holistic human approach, and help the individuals in need.
Okay, we turn now to Dr. Hawkins. Your response on different points of view from advocates who are coming to the table with solutions to homelessness.
I absolutely think that we need to come together and form a unified plan between Salt Lake City, the state, and county. As it is right now, we are working against each other. Some of you may have read an op-ed that I wrote arguing that we should not have a third homeless shelter in the ballpark community, an overflow shelter that would be set to open next winter of 2022-2023. And I think this is a primary example of where these groups have been working against each other. We have to move forward with a unified vision. We have to move forward with equity. We have to think about these 400 to 500 overflow shelter beds that service providers are asking for this winter. We can't be fighting against each other as our communities and service providers. We have to figure out a plan to work together so we don't have to keep cycling through this conversation over and over again. Let's commit to the scattered site plan.
Mr. Hanson, the next minute is yours.
A lot of the other candidates have already mentioned a lot of what I believe in. I believe what it basically boils down to is resources, arguing over who's going to pay the bill, and pride. I chose to run my campaign on the problems of pride and running as a fraud. Not that any of the candidates are frauds, but you need to learn to share the resources, the responsibility, and accept the blame as well as taking the credit. Yeah, that's
Okay.
finished much.
Mr. Mono, let's move to you. Your thoughts on balancing many and various viewpoints when it comes to solutions for homelessness.
Thank you, Glenn. This is a very important question and something that's of utmost concern to District 5. I want to start by saying that we need to remember that homelessness and poverty are human conditions, and we need humane solutions to these. The problem is not that somebody set up a camp or a tent in front of your house. The problem is that there is a system that allowed human beings to go without the basic human rights of housing, food stability, mental and physical health care, and without addiction recovery services. So we need to resolve that system, and that's something that takes collaboration with the city, the county, the state, and the federal government. But on a municipal level, that looks like continuing to fund affordable housing projects. We just released $8 million for affordable housing projects, but we can go further and reform our antiquated zoning laws that have increased the cost of housing and have made it more difficult for people to obtain stable homes.
Okay, Mr. Chapman, we will round out this question with your response. You have 1 minute.
Salt Lake City has to go it alone because Salt Lake City is the most impacted. The state and county have not helped Salt Lake City. The road home was closed unilaterally by the state. The county refuses to lock up drug dealers that victimize the homeless. Salt Lake City needs to set up a safe camping and parking area. Salt Lake City should not have funded repairing the cars that are parked and campers that are parked used by the homeless. They just did that. The safe parking area will show that we need more funding from the state and support from the county, not just mental health, because they cut mental health in half about 10 years ago. But we also need the jail to keep the drug dealers incarcerated. That's the only way to start solving the homeless problem. Lock the drug dealers up. Keep them incarcerated.
Okay, Ms. Rill, we're going to come back to you, circle around with 30 seconds to respond to what you heard from your opponents.
I think that my opponents had a lot of great ideas today. I also want to focus on making funding a priority for the foreseeable future for the city to maintain and be able to support any sort of plan that we go forward with. I also think that we need to look to the state and ask them for resources, as well as regionally within the county and different cities, because it's going to take all of us to try and help people.
Okay. Dr. Hawkins, your response to what you heard from your opponents.
I also agree with Ms. Reel. We are hearing a lot of good ideas from other candidates. I think that we can't pretend that the encampments that are currently happening in Salt Lake City aren't impacting our residents and our neighborhood businesses. We need more mitigation funding from the state, from the Utah Homelessness Council, to be allocated to us to figure out how to deal with the public safety situation that these represent. These camps allow drug dealers to sometimes hide in plain sight. It's a shame.
Mr. Hansen?
I think everybody else has hit on it basically, but I strongly believe that in some sense you can't separate its overlap. There needs to be somebody that's willing to step up and, if necessary, forego their wages. That's not meant to be mean, but there is limited resources.
Okay, we're going to have to move on. Mr. Mono, your thoughts.
Thank you. I take exception to what Mr. Chapman said. Salt Lake City cannot go it alone. We don't have the funding. Salt Lake City is receiving $84 million in ARPA funding while the state has $1.5 billion. We need help, and we need help from other agencies that have more funding and more resources than we do in Salt Lake City. This is a regional problem. It is not a Salt Lake City problem. It is a problem for the entire state, and we need the entire state to be part of the solution.
All right, Mr. Chapman, you will have the final 30 seconds on this question.
My point was that Salt Lake City has to take the lead on this. Yes, the state has to fund our help. The county has to fund us, but the solution really is to remove the drugs and drug dealers from the population. And it's so bad right now, the feds book drug dealers in other counties. The solution is to remove the drugs, take the lead, stop asking the state and county they don't respond.
Okay, we have to move on to the next question. It's along the same topic, the unsheltered. This was brought up by Dr. Hawkins already, the mayor's office stopping the creation of that new shelter within your district. I'd like each of you to take a minute to talk about that, where you stand on that issue, and shelters within your district as a whole. Dr. Hawkins, you get the first minute on this one.
Thank you very much. This is such an important issue to the ballpark community and also the downtown community. We have an overconcentration of homeless resources when we were promised by the city a scattered site model. We cannot allow the siting of another shelter in the ballpark community, and there are all kinds of reasons why. There's equity, there's the idea that an adult overflow shelter needs to be kept physically distant from the youth resource center, which is less than 2 blocks away. There's also the idea that there are already 238 units of affordable housing planned for that same block of Paramount Avenue. And if this shelter moves forward, we won't be able to have that housing. If the solution to homelessness is affordable housing, why would we put an already approved affordable housing plan at risk? It makes no sense. It shows that we're working against each other. We have to work together.
Mr. Hansen, your thoughts on the mayor's move to stop the creation of that new shelter and on new shelters within your district? 1 minute.
Okay, like they say, we're fighting each other. Some of the resources and laws are already in place. They're coming up with new laws, which just confuses matters. Now, for instance, during the World War II and the Depression, people were converting garages into houses. Now, that can be done. It could help house the homeless. Like I say, it just amounts to a matter of greed and who's going to foot the bill. And that's what I'm choosing to work on rather than try to go against some of my other opponents, so to speak. Thank you.
Mr. Mono, where do you stand on new shelters coming in within the boundaries of your district?
Thanks, Glenn. I supported the mayor's decision to halt that new homeless resource center in the ballpark neighborhood. I agree that we do not need to concentrate more services in one neighborhood. It was hard for me to make that decision because I know how desperately needed those shelter beds are, but we have time. We have time to get this one right. That was not slated to be a service until the winter of 2022, and so we have plenty of time to get this right. The mayor's put a 6-month hold on new permanent resource centers in the city of Salt Lake City, and now we have 6-month time clock that is ticking where we need to get our zoning ordinances right. And I'm the only candidate up here that understands zoning and land use ordinances to a level that will be able to make the correct decisions in order to get geographic equity throughout our city, so that when new homeless resource centers are sited, they don't concentrate the negative effects in one neighborhood like they are at the ballpark.
Mr. Chapman, the next minute is yours, where you stand on new shelters within the district.
I don't think we need more shelters in the district or even in the city. I think we need a safe camping area because a lot of homeless don't want to be in the shelters which are full of drugs. The last follow-up audit of the homeless resource centers made it very clear they're full of drugs. They recommended drug dogs. The city won't allow drug dogs outside of the shelter to stop drugs from going into the shelter. So a lot of the homeless out there are looking for a safe camping area, and instead of allowing them on the street, on the sidewalks, or in the park, they should have a safe camping area. That's what's important. And I'm a little confused because the mayor put a moratorium on permanent shelters, but the proposal is a temporary overflow shelter. I think they're two different issues.
All right, Ms. Real, we're going to give you the final minute on this question.
Thanks. Listen, I agree with Darren and Dr. Hawkins about this situation, and I respect and am so grateful for both of their voices, especially Dr. Hawkins, when this shelter was proposed. What bothered me about this was the lack of transparency and the lack of communication from the state down to the city. A lot of residents were told of this through a newspaper article. That should never happen. What our community deserves is someone that goes to them before a major decision like an overflow shelter is put into their neighborhoods. They deserve to be heard. They deserve to have their voices and their input in that decision-making process, especially when we have such strong community councils. For me, I would go to the residents immediately, hear their concerns, and I would be their voice on the city, fighting for exactly what they want. Thanks.
Okay, we're now going to move to rebuttal time. I saw some of the candidates shaking their heads during some of the responses during that question. So 30 minutes to respond to what you heard. Dr. Hawkins, we'll start with you.
I appreciate Ms. Reel's comments because I want to say that's exactly what we did. As soon as we learned about this decision through an article in the Salt Lake Tribune, I immediately called a meeting of stakeholders and wrote an op-ed. 107 community members and stakeholders came to the table to have the only community outreach that has so far existed on this topic. And that is what I would do if another bad decision came down to affect the district. I would bring people together. I've done it. I'll do it again.
Okay, Mr. Hansen, 30 seconds.
I think the other candidates are just about making my point there. Thank you.
All right. If you don't want to use up the rest of your time, we will go ahead and move on. Mr. Mono, 30 seconds to you.
Yeah, thanks, Glenn. I was one of the candidates that was shaking their head. This is actually a proposal for a permanent shelter, and it's a permanent overflow shelter, but it's not a seasonal shelter either. So that's why it was of utmost importance that we were to advocate for that to be paused, put on hold, so that we can get this right. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chapman, 30 seconds.
I agree. It's an overflow shelter. It is permanent, but it's only temporary during the winter. My problem is, again, the county doesn't listen to us. The state doesn't listen to us. The agenda didn't even have, we're going to put a shelter, overflow shelter, at 252 Brooklyn. It didn't go on the agenda. They tried to hide it. They tried to make it clear that they don't want to hear from us, and that was wrong.
All right, thank you very much. I need to clarify one thing real quick. Ms. Reel, you had 30 seconds on this one?
I think I started it.
Yeah, you did.
Yep.
Okay. I just want to make clear because in my rundown it says you're up next, but I believe we finished that discussion already and we will move on. So we are about halfway through the debate at this point, so we want to take a little breather here. And we want to let you know that this year, this race and many others are being determined through ranked choice voting. Ranked choice voting is a system where voters can use that ballot to not only vote for their preferred candidate, but then also indicate their backup choices as well. So in the race we're featuring tonight, for example, you would rank candidates 1 through 5. Then through a process of elimination, once one candidate gets more than 50% of the vote, that candidate is declared the winner. We're going to go ahead and get back to the debate now, and we're going to be shifting to public safety. A recent report saying that police response times in Utah's capital city for the most critical of calls was over 17 minutes. That's far above the national average. So my question to you, the candidates tonight, what can you do to reduce police response time? And we do begin with you, Mr. Hansen.
Thank you. This is something I've been studying all my life. You could reduce police response time by, like the mayor of the city, if you read the Utah Code or United States Code for that matter, could swear in a police chief. Now, they necessarily might not have the training, but it's like a job, apprenticeship. You could learn on the job just as well as you can in the classroom. If you go and just come out of the classroom with the training, a lot of times when you actually deal with real life situations, it doesn't work out that well.
All right, Mr. Mono, 17 minutes. When every minute counts in an emergency, that's not a good response time. How do you address that?
Thank you, Glenn. And I appreciate the question because it gives me an opportunity to be crystal clear about my stance on public safety. There's a narrative out there that I don't care about crime or lawlessness, and that could not be further from the truth. Kevin and I are raising 4 young kids. We live steps from Jefferson Park. I hear you, I see it too, and I'm experiencing this with you. During my time on council, we have funded additional social workers, additional civilian response teams, another medical response team, and we've increased the police and fire department budgets so that their salaries are the highest in the state. I've also advocated for increased lighting at Jefferson Park and on Paramount Avenue to make those spaces more safe. And I'm going to continue to fight to refill the police officers' ranks. But what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to make policies that will criminalize homelessness or criminalize poverty. That is inhumane, and I'm not going to stand for it.
Mr. Chapman, talk about the slow response time we're seeing out of the Salt Lake City Police Department. 1 minute.
Well, we've seen this coming for years. I've had several op-eds in the paper warning about it. Now we're seeing it for real on the streets. Police officers are arresting the same person dozens of times, and a lot of times the jail won't take them. They will not book career criminals. Look on the jail dashboard. You'll see some of them have been arrested over 100 times, some close to 200 times. That's the problem. The county will not support law enforcement in Salt Lake City. In addition, Salt Lake City won't pay the police officers what they deserve. For years, this city has given police officers the same raise as regular employees. Only after the last 2 budgets defunded the police did a budget amendment pass that used ARPA funds that gave them a big raise. That's not good enough. We need a retention and a bonus proposal to keep cops on staff.
Ms. Rill, the next minute goes to you.
I think we can all agree that this is an issue that is facing our entire city, and we need to work today to start finding ways to make our community safer. The biggest thing that I would do is something that I do every day in my job. For the last 15 years in higher education, I've worked to recruit and retain students at Utah State and Salt Lake Community College. That would be the first thing I do. Come up with a plan, a comprehensive strategic plan to try and recruit people to join our police force. And then find ways to retain them. Keep them here in the city working for Salt Lake City. It's going to take money, and it's going to take resources to get together to really go out and reach out to individuals that would be interested in joining, because right now our biggest issue is that we are down officers. We need to recruit them and we need to retain them. And we can diversify the positions to add mental health counselors, which is another great way to recruit people to join.
Dr. Hawkins, your turn. Response for police.
Thank you. Public safety is my #1 priority as a candidate. In District 5, we saw violent crime go up 63% last year, and homicides go up by 250%. And those numbers are astonishing. And they're so astonishing that Police Chief Brown had to require a 250-hour check of the statistics because he thought that 17-minute response time was so unbelievable. We should be shocked. We need to be conducting exit interviews of the officers who left, and over 100 have left in the past year. I'm the only candidate with an A+ rating from both the Fraternal Order of Police and Equality Utah. Our city's relationship with our police department is broken. The officers who left didn't necessarily leave for higher salaries. Some of them left for agencies with lower salaries. We need to know why they left, and we need to be prepared to fix these relationships.
Okay, we're going to now move into rebuttal time, but I have a specific follow-up question. We heard the idea that our police in Utah's capital city are not supported and they're not paid properly by the city. Mr. Hansen, you have 30 seconds. Do you believe that is at the crux of this issue?
What I believe is that we need to pay our officers what we're worth. The fire department needs to be paid what they're worth. My grandfather raised me, says it's not necessarily the wage that you're making, it is the conditions that you're working under. And I strongly believe that's why a lot of the officers are choosing to leave the city. Some of us, or some officers and some people.
Okay, I'm sorry, but your 30 seconds run up there, and we have to maintain a tight schedule here. Mr. Mono, are you and your colleagues and the current mayor and administration supporting our police and paying them the way you should?
Thank you for the question. A lot of the things we've been talking about tonight are things that we're already doing. We raised the police department budget by $5 million directly to officer salaries. And in some cases, that was a 30% increase, which is unheard of in any government position. So we have raised those. But I'm prepared to go further, and I'm prepared to increase more positions in the police department if the mayor, the chief, and the data tell us that's necessary. But we are doing the things that we've been talking about tonight. We just need to give it time for those systems to work.
Okay, Mr. Chapman, you bring up the idea that they are not supporting the police the way they should and paying them the way they should. Specifically, what would you do differently? 30 seconds.
I'd implement a retention and recruitment bonus almost immediately. We tried to get it a couple of months ago, and we've been losing. We're over 100 lost cops in the last year. That's pretty bad. This is so bad that the city council called one of the most justifiable shootings you will ever see as a murder, and it wasn't. So the police officers on the street don't think they're supported.
Ms. Rill, 30 seconds to you. Do you believe the city is appropriately supporting our police department?
Yeah, thanks. I'll start by saying I do have an A- in with my rating on the Fraternal Order of Police. So Amy's a valedictorian, but I'm second there. We need to pay them more. We need to pay a lot of city employees more. We need to pay teachers more. We've lost a lot of great teachers because they can't make enough money. It's an issue, systemic issue, where we don't pay the people that work the hardest, that are the glue of our society, and we need to work on that.
Dr. Hawkins, you will have the last 30 seconds on this question.
Thank you. Yes, I am very supportive of the unhiring or the unfreezing of police hiring that we supported in January as a community, and also the salary increase. Starting salaries were the highest in the region, but they no longer are. Now they're somewhere between 9th and 11th in the region. We need to conduct exit interviews to understand the culture changes that are going to be necessary to bring people back. It's not just going to be dollars.
Okay, we're going to move on to our next topic, and that question is on development and housing, another huge issue impacting your district. The neighborhoods in your district really do have unique character, but we're obviously, as you know, in a housing shortage, and people are really being priced out of the market. Many in the next generation wondering how they're going to afford to live here. So when thinking about development, how do each of you see the district in 20 years? Mr. Mono, you are the first on this question.
Thank you for the question, Glenn. One of the most heartbreaking conversations that I've continually had this year with residents on their doorstep is when parents tell me that they're worried their kids are never going to be able to afford to live in our city. That's sad, and we need to move quickly. This is urgent that we make action on our housing crisis. Salt Lake City just released $8 million for affordable housing, but funding is not enough. We need to move forward with ideas like inclusionary zoning. Inclusionary zoning would get moderately affordable housing, the kind that a school teacher, a doctor, or a police officer, or a firefighter could afford, out of the market without us paying for it. And then we can direct all of our funding towards permanent supportive housing. Those are the kind of units that somebody exiting homelessness or somebody on a fixed income can afford to live in comfortably. I'm the only candidate up here that understands these issues and these laws and understands the development community and how to balance those two competing priorities to create the best policy solutions.
Mr. Chapman, when it comes to development and housing, how do you want your district to look in 20 years?
I want my single-family home neighborhoods to look like single-family home neighborhoods, low density and streets that can handle low density housing. If you increase density on those streets, you're going to have more pollution. It doesn't make sense. 80% of this city does not allow housing. Tens of thousands of acres could allow housing. We tried to get housing at the International Center for 50,000 employees. The city said, no, airport won't allow it. And then they turned around and gave a loan for $1 million to do housing on the same zone they refused to do housing. So it doesn't make sense. This city is standing in the way of providing housing. The inclusionary zoning proposal was brought to the city council several years ago, and they dropped it. They tabled it. They did nothing with it. I agree, we need inclusionary zoning for the 1,500 new apartments approved last year, but only 63 detached homes, and it's racist to think that poor people and rich people don't want the same thing, a single-family home.
You went over your time there, so we have to move on to Ms. Reel. Talk about the changes you would like to see when it comes to development and housing.
Thanks. I appreciate this question because one of the reasons why I'm running is because I care a lot about how we grow. I want to create a city that's sustainable for generations to come, not just for right now and not just for making money right now. We are in a housing shortage and housing prices are going up. Rent is ridiculous. And we should have people live in the city and where they work. And right now, people who work in the city aren't able to live there. The state has money that they can help us with affordable housing. We need to reach for that. We also need to be creative, incentive-based zoning, working with developers to tell them to help provide back to the neighborhoods in which they're building. They can do that. We can work with them and fight to make sure that our neighborhoods are being contributed to as we are continuing to develop. And think of another ADUs and other creative solutions that we can look for affordable housing and that keep the character of our neighborhoods.
All right, Dr. Hawkins, the next minute goes to you.
I agree with a lot of what has been said up here by my other candidates, but what I do take issue with is Mr. Mano saying that he's the only person up here who understands affordable housing and zoning. I serve on the board of the Salt Lake City Housing Authority, where I work every month to help develop affordable housing solutions across the city. I also served as a stakeholder to help develop Ballpark's small area plan that's going to be focused around denser and more affordable housing around the 1300 South track station. These are incredibly important issues to me, and that's why I donate my time to these causes every month. I'm also the only person up here who actively reached out to the developer the night we learned about the overflow shelter and said, how can we make these 238 units of affordable housing still move forward? These are incredibly important to our community. Ballpark will be denser, but we'll be better for it.
Mr. Hansen, how do you look at developing and housing in your district?
I think like I say, it boils down to a question of who's going to pay for it and who's going to be living there. Conditions are more important than wages. And I think that's basically what it boils down to. I don't know what else you could add on to that. I'm not as good a speaker as a lot of these other candidates that are up here. I'm more of a person that gets out and actually works in the neighborhood. And I think that's about all I can say on that.
Okay. This was a good discussion, so I want to ask a follow-up question on here. I heard some about high-density housing, not a lot. If that's not a solution, Mr. Mano, when you talk about the people you meet on the doorstep worried about their children being able to afford housing, what is? And we're going to have 45 seconds, by the way, to answer this question.
Glenn, I never said that density wasn't a solution.
Right. I want to make that clear. I didn't hear you say that, but I want to get into high density specifically and what your views are on that.
Thank you. I believe that every neighborhood needs to experience a little bit of additional density in order for us to get to the numbers of housing that we need in this city. Mr. Chapman keeps talking about the 80% of the land that doesn't allow housing. Well, that would amount to putting subdivisions over the wetlands of the Great Salt Lake and up to the peak of the mountains, and that's not a solution I'm ever going to support, George.
Okay. Mr. Chapman, let's go to you. If high-density housing is not a solution here, what is?
Well, I'd like to see more single-family detached homes, not the 63 we approved last year, versus 1,500 apartments. We shouldn't become Apartmentville, USA. And I'm talking about the tens of thousands of acres south of I-80, not in the wetlands, but south of I-80 that are already being used, underutilized, and developers would love to put housing there. Utah has a plan to allow cities to force developers to do all the infrastructure and everything that's needed for housing, but we won't allow it because we keep assuming that people with low income will accept higher density. Most people want single detached homes.
Ms. Reel, your thoughts on high-density housing?
Thanks. You know, what's interesting to me is that the role of the city council member isn't to be an expert in everything, but to be able to hear everyone's concerns. And the concerns that I hear are people in certain areas of the district are mad about developments. They don't want high density developments. And then people in other places are mad that there's no affordable housing and they can't find a house to build. Well, for me, I think it's going to be all about taking all of those concerns and all of the planning and the future planning that will need to come when those developments do come, and trying to work with the community to understand their issues about the developments and the housing issues that we're having in our district, and coming up with creative solutions that leaves everyone feeling like their neighborhood is a place that they want to be still.
Dr. Hawkins, your thoughts on high-density housing?
I hate to break it to George Chapman, but I am in fact a happy resident of a townhome. But I do support denser housing. But for denser housing to work in our communities, we need amenities that surround them. We need pedestrian lighting. We need parks. We need this housing to not be located in food deserts. And there are a surprising number of food deserts still in Salt Lake City. In addition, we need to make room for the idea that there can be affordable owner-occupied housing at every level. We can explore land trusts. Right now, there's such a disparity within District 5 between owner-occupied and renter. Everyone deserves to be able to build equity in their home. I'd love to give people that opportunity.
All right, Mr. Hanson, you will round us off here. Your thoughts on high density and the role it plays?
It's and who wants to live on the property. There's one thing I've noticed in the city that Mr. Chapman was talking about. It's that people make promises that they're not able to keep for some reason or another. And we've been promised by the city that a certain district or neighborhood is going to be used for that purposes, and they'll build the houses for the low-income people, and then for an unknown reason, planned or unplanned, it's turned over to the medium-income people or the upper-income people that get those housing units that have been promised to the homeless or lower income.
Thank you very much. We do have one last question, and this is unique to your district. Your district is the only one in Salt Lake City that does not have a library. Talk about that. Would you support one? Does one need to be in your district? Mr. Chapman, we will begin with you on that one.
Yes. I mean, a couple of expletives, yes. I mean, every district should have a couple of libraries. We've been trying for pocket libraries in every district for years. We tried for a pocket library at 255 South Main. Amy Fowler tried, and we didn't get it. So we've been trying. I agree, we need pocket libraries in every district. It's important. It's part of the basic services that the city should provide everywhere.
So how do you go about, you have 30 seconds left, how do you go about doing that?
Well, we have, instead of spending a lot of money on brand new buildings and refurbishing buildings, we should be spending the money on pocket libraries.
All right, Ms. Rill, your thoughts on a library in the district?
I agree with Mr. Chapman. I do think we need a library in our district. We need to make reading and learning resources accessible for students and for families to be able to learn and grow. My sister Caroline, a teacher and an avid reader, would be really happy about this question because she's a library fanatic, and she would demand that a library is in her district, and I'm surprised I haven't heard of many more people asking for this. We need to look for creative ways like alternate buildings or maybe smaller pop-up libraries that could work and be scattered throughout the city and in the district. The small little libraries that you see on the corner, people love those. They're building them all over. Those are awesome, but we need a resource center that has internet, that has all of the supplies and things that students need while they're learning, and families can go there to grow and take classes. It's a great asset to the community and something that I hope we can find funding for because our district really needs one.
Dr. Hawkins, the next minute goes to you.
I'm so passionate about libraries. I have to admit, my very first political activism in 7th grade was to save a public library. And I have to admit, Sterling Public Library is still there, maybe because of a petition I ran in 7th grade. I have heard our residents ask for a library. We're very passionate about the idea. I know some people are looking at the public utility building, thinking that it's going to be outgrown at some point, and that would be a lovely space for a library. Other creative solutions, I always liked bookmobiles as a kid, and maybe that's corny, but I just think they are so cool, and I would love to see them come to a nice green space in District 5 to stop and, you know, maybe cross-pollinate with the Liberty Park Farmers Market. I think that would be an awesome use of community space and community building.
All right, Mr. Hanson, we will turn to you.
I think that's a way that you could hang on to neighborhood character too. Like up in Sugar House, they had a library. They tear it down or use it for a different purpose other than what it's promised. Now, you could continue on in the old building, or you could take space in another building, or maybe share space some way. I don't know how you'd go about, again, that boils down to like greed, resources that are available. I've been raised that you use what's available. And unless the building's fallen down, you don't build a new one. I don't know how you could put that gracefully, but that's what I believe in.
All right, Mr. Mono, let's finish up this one with you. You have 1 minute.
Thank you, and thank you for the question. Of course, we need a library in District 5. And not only do District 5 residents think that, but the library's recently completed master facilities plan identified that Liberty Wells and Ballpark are the two least served by the current public library system. So not only do we, and yes, I support mobile libraries, I support pocket libraries, but we need a real library in our district, and I think we can get one. And I also have another idea of where that can go. There's a building I know for sale on Brooklyn Avenue. And guess what? I've already started talking about this idea because I'm a solution finder, and I know that building has no use right now, but it could be a perfect public library. And so that's a discussion that we are already having. I already have momentum on many issues on the city council and things that are of importance to our district and our residents. And so I'm pleading with you to please mark me #1 on your ballot this year so I can keep pushing those initiatives.
Okay, we're now at the end of this debate. That means each candidate has 1 minute to give a closing statement, a final message to you, the voter. And it was determined before the debate, the first closing statement would go to Mr. George Chapman.
Okay, again, my name is George Chapman. I'm running because I want the city to stop defunding the police. 10,000 callers a month are trying to get police response, and they don't get it. And the problem is the city council refuses to hire more police. That's a problem. I want to open up the tens of thousands of acres south of I-80 to housing. It needs housing. It's utilized, it has some infrastructure, and the state says we can do it. I want the city council to insist that the county book and incarcerate drug dealers, because we're not going to solve the homeless problem until the drugs and drug dealers are locked up. Please consider George Chapman for District 5 in November and on your ranked choice voting ballot. Appreciate your consideration.
All right, now to a closing statement from Miss Sarah Rill.
Thank you. Tonight we've talked a lot about policies and how we tackle tough issues. We've also, during this campaign, I've noticed that there's been a lot of politics. I've ran a grassroots, people-focused campaign because this job is about people. It's about representing people, listening to their voices, and advocating for them. It's not about how many endorsements you get or how much money you've raised from businesses or big donors, and it doesn't matter what party stance you have. This is a nonpartisan municipal race. For me, this is about looking to people and listening and responding and advocating for them. And that is exactly why I'm running, and that is exactly what I'll do. I will be your voice, and together we can tackle any challenges that we face. Let's get real. Vote Sarah Riel, #1 on your ballot. Thanks.
Dr. Amy J. Hawkins, you will have the next minute.
Thank you. I think what allows me to stand apart from the other candidates tonight is what I've already accomplished for the district, but what I've accomplished as a volunteer. I've sought solutions for creating pedestrian safety and street crossings over some of our district's most dangerous streets, like State Street, because I think that bringing bike and pedestrian safety to our community will bring better public health and better public safety, because I think eyes and feet on the street are a good way to address some of the shootings and the homicides that we've seen on Kensington Avenue. I also want to let you know that I would be here to repair our broken relationships between the city and the Salt Lake Police Department. I want to reiterate, I'm the candidate who can see that this relationship above all needs to be repaired.
Mr. Vance Hansen, we will now go to you for a 1-minute closing statement.
Yes, I urge you the voter to vote their conscience. I also urge you to look beyond what some people would take as a form of arrogance or a form of what you say, incompetence. Dig down to what you really believe in yourself and just vote your conscience. Don't try to push onto somebody else what you believe. If you believe I'm right, then vote for me. If you believe that any of the other candidates are right, by all means, vote for them. I'm here to give you a choice and just offer what I know.
Okay,
I believe in representing the district.
We will have to move on to our final last statement now. That goes to incumbent Darren Mono.
Thank you, Glenn. As I've been knocking doors all year and connecting with our constituents, I've seen how much they love our city and how excited they are for our future. I'm the best candidate up here because I understand the role of the City Council. I know how to do this job. And I built relationships with my colleagues in the City Council and the Mayor's office who already view me as an expert on zoning and land use policy. And I have the experience to get things done now. I'm a problem solver. I look at a problem from multiple directions, I meet the people involved, and I balance competing priorities to create the best policy solutions. And I'm here to listen to you, my constituents. I'm here to make our community stronger and more tight-knit, and I'm here to protect and improve our public spaces so that Salt Lake City will be the type of town that urban planning nerds like me will visit, study, and wonder how the heck we did that. Vote Darren Mono #1 on your ballot this year and visit darrenmono.com to learn more about me or connect with our campaign. Thanks.
And a special thanks to all 5 candidates for being here and engaging in this important conversation tonight. We do appreciate that. We do want to remind you that Election Day is Tuesday, November 2nd. Mail-in ballots have already started going out. I got mine this week already. Perhaps you did as well. There are also early voting options and same-day options. Make sure to check with your local county clerk on what's available in your area. We are providing these debates throughout the week, and we're doing that because it's important to get to know these candidates. These local elections are important. Whoever wins these races has a very important impact on your life. Tomorrow we're going to be doing District 3. That includes the Capitol Hill, Marmalade, and the Greater Avenues neighborhoods. We also do want to let you know that tonight's debate was brought to you in part by the Other Side Academy, the Pioneer Park Coalition, and the Salt Lake Chamber of Commerce. Again, get involved, learn about what's on your ballot, and make your voice heard in this important municipal election. We want to thank you for joining us tonight, and we wish you a great night. You can find all the very latest on our website as well, including this debate, abc4.com. We hope to see you at 10.
Homelessness has overwhelmed our city and community. My name is Joseph Grenny, and I am part of a team in partnership with Salt Lake City that has decided to help hundreds come off the streets of Utah and not only find a permanent home, but create a new and better way of life. We invite you to join this movement and help us build the Other Side Village. The Village will be a beautiful, secure, and self-reliant neighborhood for the most vulnerable of Salt Lake's homeless, including those with mental and physical challenges. The Village will be a state-of-the-art example of how to help the homeless by providing affordable and permanent housing inside a vibrant community, offering both meaningful employment and easily accessible social and healthcare services. Unlike traditional solutions to homelessness, we'll be applying principles of self-reliance, peer accountability, and connectedness to the Village. This endeavor will be a model in the United States for how to address homelessness in sustainable ways that transform lives and our cities. Join us. To learn how to become part of this life-changing place, visit us at theothersidevillage.org.